Hello, guys and gals. You know what? Let's do this the right way, shall we? Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So today we got the 1.23 patch notes. We're going to be going over those together here in just a second. I'll give you guys a little bit of time to show up. Oh, man. I've been waiting on these all day. All day long. Well, I've been doing other things, like making videos and stuff, and uploading, and doing some thumbnails, so we got patch notes just came out. They literally, just popped up on my screen. 1.23 build 47693, all platforms. This patch is going to go live on December 5th. This is the patch that's going to include the Abattoir of Zir, obviously. So, you know, yeah. Gameplay updates. Let's go ahead and start. A full list of possible affixes can now be previewed in the enchantment menu using the new View Possible Affixes button. So this is the enchantment window that they promised us. The enchantment window is going to be this really cool thing that basically just shows you all the possible enchantments that you can get by removing that specific enchantment. And it's going to be useful because a lot of people don't know that certain enchantments are actually linked to each other. So, like, for instance, if you have one enchantment already on the amulet and you're trying to replace something else, this enchantment could be linked to something that you're trying to get, but you can't have it because this one prevents you from having it, right? So it will at least tell us what the possible affixes are, which would be nice to see. Earned glyph experience from most nightmare dungeons was increased, so they upped the glyph EXP. This was actually really necessary because, quite honestly, it felt like you could get to level 100, cap out your character, you know, like get all the gear that you needed and still not have fully leveled up glyphs. So it looks like they're doing no changes for tier to 117, tiers 30, 60 to 9, 66 to 79. 50, 106 to 139, 75, 156 to 239, and then tier 100, 206 to 339. This is nice, but I'm not exactly sure that this is even something that was necessary at this point because the Abattoir of Zir gives so much glyph EXP now. It's like 1,000 glyph EXP just for like a tier 1 Abattoir is basically what they showed us. And that just blows 339 out of the water. But at least while you're leveling up in your nightmare dungeons, you'll have slightly higher glyphs, I suppose, which is certainly not terrible. And I think maybe you can apply this glyph EXP to the Abattoir of Zir glyph as well. So, I mean, there's also that. Although it seems to take an exorbitantly large amount of EXP, glyph EXP, to level up that new glyph. It was like 2,000 just to get it to level 2. And then it was like 4,500 to get it to level 3. So... introduced further support for NVIDIA Reflex technology. Visit the in-game settings to enable this feature. What is the NVIDIA Reflex technology? Am I behind the curve here? Have I forgotten what NVIDIA Reflex technology is? Okay, yeah. No, I did actually research this. This is that stuff that had to do with, like, mainly focusing around, like, Twitch, you know, Twitch shooters, like, Counter-Strike and like Call of Duty and stuff like that, where literally the frame rate and things like that is so important because it makes it much easier for you to have the correct, you know, like Twitch reaction because obviously what you're seeing is actually more accurate. I'm not really sure how important that is for Diablo 4, but it's nice. Developers note, after reviewing gameplay data and player feedback, we recognized that completing the higher nightmare tiers was not as rewarding as we had initially hoped for, with many players stopping their journey after reaching tier 50. The experience increase to glyphs at higher tiers was made with the intent of incentivizing players to push their builds, making their arrival at tier 100 feel that much more fulfilling. We will monitor how this change in experience pans out for players and encourage you to provide us with any feedback you have around this system. I mean, it wasn't just that the higher tiers weren't providing enough glyph EXP. That's not really what was going on. There's no real reason to if you're trying to level up, for instance, do a higher tier dungeon unless you're just trying to challenge yourself. They had originally told us that doing the higher tier dungeons would have a higher chance of getting 925 items, but that turned out to be completely and utterly false. So, yeah. There's just not a lot of good reason to do tier 100 dungeons except Glyph EXP. Because they didn't really give us very many good reasons to do them. And then on top of that, now that they've got the Abattoir of Zir in here, the tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons might actually be just not even worth doing anymore. Especially considering that the tier 1 Abattoir of Zir seems to be about the same difficulty as a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon. Bug fixes, accessibility. Fixed an issue where the screen reader didn't announce the required packs for vampiric powers. Fixed an issue that made the screen reader malfunction on the Steam Deck. Dungeons. Fixed an issue where the mechanical box wouldn't respawn if a player was killed by the boss in the Bastion of Faith. Fixed an issue if the fallen dungeon temple where the objective to destroy the idol of the fallen temple could not be completed properly if the idol was destroyed instantly. Hoda barbs. Fixed an issue where the debuff effects in the Fallen Temple could be avoided when leaving and re-entering the dungeon. Fixed an issue where enemies from the Soul Survivor event could spawn behind locked doors and hollowed ossuary, blocking the event mastery completion. Fixed an issue where the Nightmare Dungeons wouldn't properly reset after all revives were exhausted when playing local co-op. Fixed an issue where enemies spawned by the Animus carrying monsters with the Summoner affix unexpectedly carried Animus. Fixed an issue where the bonus elemental damage affixes in Nightmare Dungeons scaled their damage too low or too high for their respective tier. I think that had to do with us getting one-shot by the elemental damage affixes. That's interesting. Gameplay. Fixed an issue where some attacks made by the Echo of Lilith would not properly trigger if the player in the party that started the encounter died. Fixed an issue where the first death from above cast by Echo of Lilith had irregular timing and didn't display an incoming projectile indicator. Fixed an issue where Frostburn and Mother's Embrace could drop as sacred and not ancestral from Tormented Echo of Varshan in World Tier 4. We've all been talking about this one. Every single time I found Frostburns from Varshan, they would always be sacred. And I don't know why. And I guess that was a bug. And the same thing with Mother's Embrace. Apparently Mother's Embrace would always drop as sacred as well from Varshan in World Tier 4. It was a very odd thing, but it was constant. And it wasn't just could drop, it would always drop as sacred. So if you got Frostburns or Mother's Embrace from Varshan, it was always a sacred version. Fixed an issue where gems could still drop from some sources, such as the Avarice Chest or Whisper Caches. I don't really care about that. But instead of gem fragments, I mean, oh well. Fixed an issue where rabies cast by werewolf companions from the Alpha legendary aspect could miss. That's interesting. Fixed an issue where druids could continuously run into a wall if trample was used to move forwards towards a nearby wall. Interesting. I actually had that happen to me quite a few times. It's one of the reasons why I took trample off my druid, specifically, because I felt like it was absolutely useless in most regards. Mainly just because it, well, you know, it just didn't really seem like a very good thing to get stuck in a permanent running into the wall while the monsters wailed on you. So I nixed it. So I guess hopefully that's fixed, and maybe I can actually bring it back into my build now. Fixed an issue where the treasure goblins would sometimes become invincible and run away if the player mounted or unmounted near them. Treasure goblins have had enough of your bullying, Wanderer. Season of the Blood. Fixed an issue where the blood harvesters could quickly disappear after spawning. Fixed an issue where the Norvake enemy could spawn repeatedly in certain co-op situations. Fixed an issue where the seeds of hatred extracted by being hatred's chosen did not count toward the season journey objective progress. Fixed an issue which made potent blood dropped from the blood well inaccessible. I thought they already fixed that. Didn't they already fix that last time? Fixed an issue where Duriel wouldn't spawn when the player re-entered the boss arena after respawning. Developers note, a previous hotfix allowed players to walk through the blood wells to access the potent blood. This change reverts the ability to walk through the blood wells, but in exchange, the potent blood no longer spawns in the middle of the blood wells, so it can be easily picked up. User interface and user experience. Fixed an issue where map overlays for HellTide and Blood Harvest wouldn't display properly when entering a region covered by a fog of war. Fixed an issue where the tooltip displayed while hovering over certain items could blink periodically. Fixed an issue where the text describing how to unlock mounts was inaccurate for players who skipped the campaign. If they choose to play through the campaign, players that haven't yet unlocked mounts must complete the Done Uns Favor quest to unlock them. If the campaign is skipped, you must reach level 25 before unlocking mounts. The tooltip previously mentioned quest completion only, which is irrelevant when skipping the campaign. Fixed an issue where navigating to the season journey from a seasonal aspect wouldn't open the correct chapter. Navigating the seasonal stash with a controller will now be more consistent. Miscellaneous. Fixed an issue where visual effects on armor would remain fully visible while using concealment. Lilith sees all, foolish wanderer. Various visuals and performance and stability improvements. So all in all here, I mean, not exactly the biggest patch in the world. I mean, we do have obviously some Glyph EXP increase. Definitely nice to have a little bit of Glyph EXP increase for everybody. Honestly, it seems like Glyph EXP only comes from Nightmare Dungeons, and on top of that, there's so many other fun things to do, like Duriel, HellTides, Blood Harvest, and more that do not give Glyph EXP, that it's nice to see the Glyph EXP get boosted up a little bit. I'm not really sure what NVIDIA Reflex technology is going to do for an ARPG. It's very nice for a first-person shooter, mind you, but I mean, I guess it's still nice to have it. The couple bug fixes in here that were really nice. This one right here was a big one. I don't know exactly if this has been completely fixed or not, but basically when you ran a Nightmare Dungeon, there was usually an affix that said something along the lines of, you know, like 30% of monsters' physical damage represented as fire damage, and that fire damage is over time or whatever, right? Well, there was something going on with the bonus elemental damage that was being applied to the monsters that was making it so that the elemental damage was actually dishing out like a crazy high amount of damage. It would basically one-shot you. And I was actually unaware that it was also doing not enough as well, but I was very aware, trust me, I think most of us were very aware when it would suddenly like one-shot you. You'd go into a dungeon and you'd be like, oh, okay. That's a lot of fire damage, and your whole HP bar would just be full, like completely full with fire damage over time, and you would have to, like, you know, struggle to overcome it. This is a really good fix. I'm actually very happy that this is going the way of the dinosaur. It made Nightmare Dungeons a little bit of a pain in the butt, to be perfectly honest, because you had to kind of, I mean, you could avoid the elemental damage affixes completely, or you could just roll the dice and see whether you got a broken one or not. There was another good one in here. I'm actually kind of interested in this one with the whole like rabies thing with the werewolf companions. I am building a poison druid at the moment, and it could be interesting to see how that works. Now that the werewolf companions actually hit the rabies properly. I'd have to give up an aspect slot, though, and I'm not sure if I want to do that. This issue right here with the Frostburns and Mother's Embrace dropping as sacred was really weird, and I'm glad that they finally fixed that. I was unaware that the treasure goblins were becoming immortal. That was an odd one. This one right here was such an odd thing that people complained about on a regular basis, and I don't even really understand why they complained about it. It was like one or two places could potentially drop gems instead of the gem dust, and it was like, oh well, you just took it to the store and just deconstructed them. It was like 4 or 5 gems. It wasn't really a big deal. I mean, I guess it's been fixed, so yay. I mean, this one right here was already technically fixed, although they fixed it more officially. So I guess that's kind of nice. Other than that, though, seems like that's pretty much it. So, I mean, we're going to get Abattoir of Zir obviously added in here, but they don't really have that set up here. Now, they do have some news about the Abattoir of Zir, which we've already gone over most of this during the campfire chat. But if you want to check out the Abattoir of Zir, since this has been a relatively short video anyway. Let's go ahead and talk about it really quickly as well, since it is part of the patch notes. So on December 5th, the Abattoir of Zir is going to come out, and the Abattoir of Zir is basically a DPS check, a DPS race. You basically have 10 minutes to slay all the monsters within and spawn the Guardian, and then kill the Guardian. You cannot die while you're inside the Abattoir of Zir, which is very important to note. So if you die at all, if anybody dies at all, the Abattoir is failed. There is no, like, death counter on the side of like 4 deaths or, like, or 5 deaths or 12 deaths or whatever. Like, if anybody dies, that's it. It's over. The difficulty for the tier 1 sigil seems to be about the same as the difficulty for a tier 100 nightmare dungeon, so I would expect to go in at the very bare minimum at the lowest level. If you're not capable of doing tier 100 nightmare dungeons, then you're probably not going to be able to run the Abattoir of Zir. You do have to complete the season journey to be able to get access to the Abattoir of Zir, so do keep that in mind. So if you do not have the season journey completed right now, I do recommend that you go and you take a look at your season journey, which is, I believe it's you. Yes, you. You take a look at your season journey and you work on completing some of those objectives. You do not have to complete all the objectives. You only have to complete enough to pass each phase. You notice here that there is a special line right there that indicates how many that you have to complete. That's how many you have to complete to proceed to tier 2, and that's how many you have to complete to tier 3, and so forth and so on. You do not have to complete the entire season journey. You can notice that I am currently only barely completed with the entire season journey right here. I have met the requirements to complete it, and I have claimed my reward, but I have only completed 7 out of 9 of the total objectives, which means that you can skip some. This is important. Now, some of these are relatively easy, like, for instance, just like Purifying Seeds of Hatred. This one is actually pretty easy. You just got to open up 10 chests in a HellTide. You just open up as many chests as you possibly can. Obviously defeating a world boss, equipping at least 8 ancestral unique items simultaneously. That one's really easy. Most of you guys have those sitting in your stash. You just need to put them all on at the same time, like a big weirdo kid in his basement with some swords and armor on. And then, there's quite a few of these that are actually particularly easy to do, and then there's some that are not quite so easy to do, like killing Lilith, or it's getting like multiple items to tier 21 on the glyph ranks and so forth and so on. It's gonna be a thing. Like, but you've got several days. You got, what is it, December 1st right now? So you got like 5 days basically to go ahead and get this season journey out of the way and completed. And then once you have the season journey completed, you will unlock a special crafting recipe to be able to create the blood-forged sigils. And they did say that if you successfully complete a Abattoir of Zir, there will be some sigil or sigil dust or something that drops at the end for you to help you craft your next sigil. And on top of this, no items drop within this. Because it's a timed event, they don't want you to have to stop and pick up items as you're going. You only have 10 minutes to complete it, and obviously if you have to stop and pick up a bunch of stuff while you're trying to complete it, it doesn't really help you very much. You get 1,000 freaking glyph EXP for completing the Abattoir of Zir at the end, which is really nice. And if you can complete at least tier 1, you're going to get access to the amazing Tears of Blood glyph, which is pretty OP. I have actually confirmed also that this, where it says for every 5 core stats purchased within range, you gain 2% increased damage. It actually does go up by 0.10 per level, up to a total of 22% times per 5 core stats purchased within range, which means that technically it's going to be an absolutely insane multiplier. I tried to come up with a general roundabout understanding of how much damage it could potentially give you, depending on how much is within range. And I basically determined that there was anywhere between about 160 to 200 core stats within range of a tier 5 radius, because it does go up to tier 5 radius at level 50. And So if you take 200 and you divide that by 5, and then you multiply that by 22, you get a total multiplier of about 880%, which is it's a lot. That's an 880% times multiplier. So your damage is going to go through the roof. And this is, of course, not even considering things like the 50% bonus, which goes up by 10% every level, which can add additive bonuses as well as defensive bonuses, depending on how many rare nodes are within range. We also don't know exactly what the radius of the glyph caps out at. We know that it's a radius 4, and a radius 4 is the biggest that we currently have right now, and we know that it increases to radius 5 at level 50, but it could also increase to radius 6 at level 100, radius 7 at level 150, and finally radius 8 at level 200. We don't know where that radius caps out at. And also, it's important to note that the radius is going to directly influence how much damage it's going to give you, because for every 5 core stats, you get a huge bonus, right? So the larger the radius, the more core stats that you could potentially purchase within range, and the more damage that you could potentially get. The glyph itself seems absolutely insane, and you basically get it just for completing the first tier of the dungeon. And it does require a lot of glyph EXP to level up, so keep that in mind. The Abattoir of Zir seems to scale very, 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 very much per tier. In the demo that they showed us, they were able to go from a tier 1 to a tier 10. The monster levels in the tier 1 was a level 155 dungeon, and there was a ball lightning sorceress that was used to check these dungeons out, and the ball lightning sorceress seemed to handle it just fine, as you would think a tier 100 dungeon would be handled. However, they went up by 10 tiers, or 9 tiers higher than the tier 1, and the monsters were level 157, and they had a lot more either HP or damage reduction, and the ball lightning sorceress was not struggling in terms of defensive capability, but was struggling very highly in terms of offensive capability. And I think this comes down to the meat and potatoes of basically what the Abattoir of Zir is, which it is a DPS race. And of course it makes sense, because what you get from the Abattoir of Zir is a huge increase in damage output. So as you level up the Tears of Blood glyph, you are going to also increase the damage of your character by huge percentages, and that will of course help you clear the next level of the Abattoir of Zir. It seems as if, and this is just my view on this, that you are going to have to require the use of the Tears of Blood glyph to actually clear some of these higher dungeons. If tier 10 was any indication, and if tier 20 is literally 2 times harder than tier 10, then you're going to need an insanely large amount of damage to be able to clear these dungeons, especially within the time limit. And I think that's the most important thing here, is that yes, while some characters might certainly be able to clear the dungeon without issue, maybe you're just extremely tanky and it just takes you a while, you still might not be able to clear it within the 10 minutes that are required. It is also kind of important to note that these Abattoir of Zir dungeons really just seem a lot like Diablo 3 Greater Rifts. If you played Diablo 3 at any point and you know what Greater Rifts are, I could literally write you a little comparison here. Griffs, no items drop, okay? Time limit, 10 minutes. Killing monsters summons the Guardian. Use the pedestal at the end to upgrade your gem. Abattoir of Zir, no items drop, exactly the same. Time limit, 10 minutes, exactly the same. Killing monsters summons the Guardian, exactly the same. Use the pedestal to upgrade your glyphs, pretty much exactly the same. Honestly, the Abattoir of Zir seems like a direct one-to-one copy of the greater rifts in Diablo 3, and I really don't know if it's a good thing. I don't really think it's a good thing anyway. There is some indication of what kind of monsters that we're going to get. So during the run, the tier 1 run, he was able to summon the monsters. We only got to see one. And what he summoned of the Guardian was actually 3, not 1, but 3 Bloodseekers. So if you're unfamiliar with the Bloodseekers are basically player characters. So they are players. They can be necromancers, barbarians, rogues, etc., etc. And they actually have your abilities. They also spawn with random modifiers, just like all other elites do. So they can have Tempest, they can have the electric, fire, they can have shadow clone, all sorts of crazy stuff. And this actually can be absolutely insane. There are some combinations of Bloodseekers which will absolutely annihilate even the strongest defenses. One of them specifically is the Fire Enchanted, which isn't bad by itself, plus the Shadow Clone. So what happens in this situation is with the Fire Enchanted Shadow Clone is the Bloodseeker will spawn 4 Shadow Clones that also explode for a total of 5 explosions. And this can happen instantaneously. And so what occurs basically is you'll be fighting this monster, this Shadow Clone monster. He will spawn the Shadow Clones around you in a circle, which is generally how they do it. And then all of a sudden they will all start exploding at the same time, almost instantaneously. And you will if you are not like a god tier tank, you're going to fall. And it doesn't take very many explosions before even the god tier tank falls when 5 fire enchanted monsters are standing around you in a circle, all exploding. There's also some other pretty nasty combos, like for instance, Suppressor and Poison Enchanted. Tempest can also be pretty nasty. So I'm not exactly sure if it's always going to be 3 Bloodseekers. This is just one of the examples that we were given. So Bloodseekers do count as bosses. So they are immune to crowd control effects. So this is important. So if you are a character that primarily has like crowd control effects, like for instance my Freeze Sorceress, which freezes everything, she's going to have trouble fighting 3 Bloodseekers because she's not going to be able to crowd control them, she's not going to be able to chill them, freeze them, slow them, or any of the above. Maybe a little bit rough. If you've never fought 3 tier 100 Bloodseekers, I would advise you run some tier 100s for a little while. They will spawn on you as a regular event within season 2. Get a little bit of time with the Bloodseekers, because if these are the bosses that we're expected to fight within the Abattoir of Zir, you're going to have to know how to fight them. And they can be absolutely a pain in the butt depending on what modifiers they spawn with. Especially when you have 3 of them and they're all hunting you down at the same time. I'm assuming that this is going to go up or change. Maybe even it might be 4. The modifiers that they spawn with is obviously going to sometimes make them really easy. You might end up with like a really easy set of Bloodseekers, and that's great. But the fact that you can't die inside the Abattoir of Zir means that, well, if you do end up with one of these crappy ones that is like instant KO, you might just be out of luck. I think that's pretty much it for the patch notes. There's not really a whole lot more to go over. It was kind of a small patch. I'm probably going to do some Diablo 2 Resurrected later today. I want to get started on my Assassin solo self-found run, at the very least. It was voted by you guys to be the Blade Fury Assassin, so I hope you'll join me for that. That's going to be fun. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me for these little patch note videos. It's fun going over things and analyzing stuff. And I look forward to testing out the Abattoir of Zir on December 5th when it comes out. As always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.